Today I'm excited to start a new project, which is a desk build, and it's going to be a desk for a student, but it is large enough for an adult. This desk was initially published by Fix This Build That YouTuber Brad Rodriguez, which he is one of my favorite YouTubers. So I'll put a link to his video and the plans for this build, which Brad has on his website, and I'll put all that information in the description below. Now the plans are not that expensive, and trust me, what you spend in plans will more than make up for what it would cost you to experiment or build this on the fly. The cut lists alone are worth it. Now obvious, my goal is to get the desk built, but I would also like to be careful not to divulge all the plans. I would like this video to pay homage to Brad's plans, but not give them away. I want to show the beginner DIY woodworker angle on this, so please expect a few mistakes, and you might be screaming at your screen about a few of my methods, so go easy on me in the comments, but please do leave me comments. I'll definitely learn from this. I also have some plans to do a couple of things a little differently with this, so that should lead to some interesting fun. This will take me a couple of videos to get completed, so I'll probably highlight the tough parts, which I think in this first video is going to be the legs. And I know that tabletop is going to give me trouble, so I'm nervous about those for sure. Big thanks to Brad for this great build and the plans, and if I don't completely massacre this desk, I may do a few more of them in the future. Subscribe and please check out my other woodworking videos, and let's get started on those legs.
Well, leave it to me to go changing the plans on the very first step. But here, as I comically tried to get the dust collection hood to work on this, yes, it does go over it, and you'll see it does go over it very comically. But I did recently have a trip to my dealer, my hardwood dealer, lumberyard, and found some poplar on sale. So you see me here with this very large chunk of poplar that is going to fit very nicely for the legs. And I also found some just straight lumber that I also used for everything else, the stretchers and whatnot for this build. So here you see me, I pulled out the, I call this the joiner sled, where you can join up one side of that and get it nice and straight. This was prior to me having a joiner. I do have one now. But this sled is going to come into play here very soon and have a major role in doing the legs. But you see that nice piece of poplar, and I am never been accused of not measuring twice and cutting once. I usually measure 10 times, 17 times, and get these legs cut out. Here's a little bit sped up on cutting out the legs from those big slabs of poplar, and I will soon take those to the planer. And when I watch back the footage, of course it's shaking because I put the tripod on the workbench, so again, learning. And when I watch back the footage, I'm like, did I really get my fingers that close? And I don't think I did. I really take safety very serious. And, you know, I'll always comment if you see anything that I'm doing wrong. But I really try to be safe, and I talk to myself, what could go wrong? You know, how can I hurt myself on, you know, before I power up something? And it really slows my work down. But again, I'm a hobbyist and not really in a hurry. But I've got the legs here, and what wonderful lumber that I found. So it was really fun to work with this poplar. And now off to the planer to get everything down to dimension that the plans call for. And if you don't have a planer, this is one of those steps that you really can mold the lumber with your table saw and just make the cuts, because this is fairly large pieces that the plan calls for. So you honestly can do this without the planer. It does make it nice, and it was one of the first purchases beyond the table saw that I made, and it has really come in handy. I've since added a benchtop jointer, which has also made things very nice in dealing with rough stock and rough lumber. Look at those pretty legs. Now, to be honest with you, that was the easy part. This was one of those parts where I probably measured and wrote and marked on the wood more than I needed to, probably more than a pro or even someone who's fairly comfortable with cutting tapers does. But I truly wanted to understand what I was doing and what I was cutting prior to moving over to the table saw and getting those cuts down. Now, I also marked on the other end of the workpiece. My cuts are on the far end, but to keep it all straight, I did put that marking triangle on the other end, and I also recommend that you do the same. And you'll see that Brad does that in his video as well. Now it's time to get out your tapering jig or your jointer jig and use that to cut these tapers. And if you don't have one, I'll put a link in the description below for a jig that Fix This Build That also did that will help you through it. And mine is not going to be big enough. You can see here that I'm coming to the realization that what I thought was going to be pretty easy for my cuts is now going to be another project. I did consider using a scrap piece of wood under the clamp and over the leg to hold it in place, but I've been wanting to modify this jig for a while to something like this. So I just went ahead and did it. It can be now a joiner jig as well as a tapering jig just by adding a couple little pieces of T-track in order to hold down in that angled format. And I do want to redo this completely. And like I said, I'll put a link in the description below about the Fix This Build That video that Brad did, and he did 2 flavors of tapering jigs, one simple one and one fancy one. And you don't really need the fancy one to get this cut done, but I think it really would be nice to have. So I'm going to do that someday soon. Now, you can see here it's done. I have the T-track on there and lining up the angled cuts and clamping it down. It's fairly simple, but you do want to pay attention to your cuts. Now you do have to raise your blade up to some towering heights to make your cuts, and you always still want to be careful while doing that, but I never felt out of control or unsafe in the blade being that high. It's just that the jig itself requires that blade to come up. You'll hear Brad mention to think these cuts through because it's possible to make one cut and then rotate the leg and then have the second cut harder to line up. You'll end up having to put the fresh beveled edge that you just cut down on the jig, and it does make it a little harder to line up your second cut if you're not kind of thinking through and thinking ahead. Just take the jig and the leg and practice flipping them on your jig and imagine the cut before you get started. Now, I don't show it, but I practiced this cut many times. I have footage of me pushing the jig across the table saw, just imagining the cut and making sure my hands can be placed in a safe manner, and I always recommend that you do that. Another good tip is to go with the zero clearance insert. If you don't have one, you can lower your blade and put painter's tape over the blade where it comes out of the saw, and then raise the moving blade up to cut through the tape. Make sure the tape edges are down tight and go all the way to the edge of the table saw on each side. It's okay for a few cuts with the tape, but don't count on it for many. It's strictly temporary. And then you can see there that my cutoff kind of flipped to the side, and it was dangerously close to getting in to that spinning blade and either coming back at me or getting wedged. So I realized it right there, and then I went with the zero clearance tape. And also you see me with the wedges there. If you're a cutoff hoarder like I am, now you have a few nice wedges to file away. Now as we look at a few more cuts, I want to just let you know that the work is not with the saw. The work is actually with the markings and lining these up to look exactly how the plans call for them. And that's the 2 cuts with all the beveled edges on the inside of the desk. So all the work is in the preparation. The cuts are the easy part. So you want to make sure that you have that, what I showed you, the legs in the beginning with those cutoff areas marked by the X and the nice little square measurement there. And the plans do go through that and tell you exactly where to make your lines and how long to make your lines on the ends of the legs. But it's different reading the plans and watching Brad go through it on his video to actually executing it. And it can be a little overwhelming, but if you just take your time and have a fresh head, make those markings and then put them on your jig and then dry run practice those and then flip it and then do it one more time, and you can kind of you can see the cuts before you actually make them, and that way you can kind of see them before you make mistakes, because this is fairly large stock to make mistakes on. So I would hate for you to have to redo the legs, and I got lucky. I got it on the first go round, but I can imagine I can definitely imagine making a mistake here if you don't think this step through. Now it's time to put your puzzle pieces back together, and what I mean by that is find the triangle lines that you put on the opposite end of the legs and the cuts and arrange those back, and then you will see your legs in a little mini formation on how they are actually going to look on the desk. And here I am trying to piece mine together and looking somewhat confused, but I do finally figure out my puzzle pieces, and I will show you those right here. And of course, a little celebration, and this is something to be celebrated. I mean, look at those. That they look amazing, and I was super happy, and it's a great end to the evening. And I want to show you, of course, the other side that helps you out, because you actually end up cutting off, the action side here gets cut away. So having that triangle on the other side allows you to kind of piece these together and give you that nice pretty visual on how they will look on your desk. So there you go.
Hey, that wasn't so bad. I thought it was going to be much harder than that. Don't forget to check out the video that Brad did about this desk and his plans, and I'm going to put both of those links in the description below. Again, many thanks to Fix This Build That and the crew for the great content that they provide and these plans and allowing me to do this video. Now, I'm not sponsored by them or affiliated with them in any way, but I did give them an email and run it by them before I started hitting the record button. Now, like everyone else, I'm trying to grow my channel, so I'd appreciate if you left a comment and maybe a like. Also, subscribe so you won't miss the next installment in this series. I've already started, and let me tell you, it's a blast so far. I'm still a little concerned about the top, and now I'm starting to wonder how I'm going to do on those drawer slides. I may need your help. I know this was a long one, but making the legs only took a few hours, and that's rough stock, milling down, and getting to the final sizes and making the legs. Let me know in the comments if you thought this was too long or if I didn't get enough detail in about these legs. Remember, I'm trying not to give away the dimensions and all of the plans while I do these videos. Stay tuned for the rest of this series, and I'll talk to you again when we start putting these legs onto some panels.